All right. Hello, everyone. It is the top of the hour, so we can go ahead and get started today. I'm Kaylee Hansen. I'm a pre-sale and business solutions consultant with SV Consulting. So I'll lead us through the majority of the webinar today. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. As we go through the webinar today, we want your guys' engagement. We want you guys involved. So if any questions or comments come up throughout the webinar, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll monitor those throughout. If it makes sense to kind of answer those questions during the webinar, we'll go ahead and do so. Otherwise, we'll have more of a dedicated Q&A session at the end as well. But thank you all for joining. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So today's webinar topic is really around automating workflows, notifications, and tasks within Acumatica. So I'm sure a lot of you are a little bit familiar with all of these concepts today, maybe leveraging them without fully realizing it as well. But they're really powerful tools that we see people start to take advantage of the more that they use Acumatica as well. So we'll walk through some of the basics today. Again, maybe a reminder for some of you, but then we'll get into some demo scenarios as well, where we'll set up different approval maps, as well as some business events and notifications associated with that as well. All right, so just looking at the agenda, first we'll kind of dive into some of the approval sides. We'll walk through some key business benefits, why people are leveraging approvals within Acumatica, why if you're not, it may be good to kind of take a look at leveraging in Acumatica as well. And then just a breakdown of some of the components that we'll see in action in the demo portion. Then we'll do the same thing for the business events in Acumatica, or the notifications. So they kind of tie hand in hand. We'll walk through how they correlate with one another. Again, walk through some of the benefits, why we start using them, maybe some real world examples as well. And then the component breakdown. So how we would start to build out new business events and notifications in the system as well. Taking what we kind of walk through in number 1 and 2, we'll do a live demo. So we'll take a scenario where we set up a new approval routing and a new approval map, and then set up a corresponding business event or notification to tell people perhaps that they have approvals. That's one use case for it. We can kind of walk through other scenarios on the notification side as well. But those will be some real world examples that we walk through and actually set up in the demonstration. And then we'll just wrap up at the end. Any questions that you guys have that weren't addressed throughout, we'll address those at the end, and then we'll also discuss next steps and what's kind of ahead for our next webinar topic as well. All right, so first kind of dialing into the approval side, some of the key business benefits here. So number 1 is reduced administrative overhead. So with the automated approval routings within Acumatica, you can kind of eliminate the manual approval, which lowers the burden on your staff, saves time, and kind of reduces the risk of maybe missing an approval or having approvals slip through the cracks. So I know when we work with customers, often coming from maybe legacy systems where this isn't just native in the software, the approvals may actually be, signature from an executive. You have to walk down maybe the hallway, get that. Again, that can take some time. It can be hard to track and keep track of. So in this case, having this all automated within Acumatica can really reduce that risk and kind of streamline that approval process as well. Next, kind of going off of that, is the improved accuracy and compliance. So within the approval routings, again, we'll take a look as we get to the demonstration portion, but we'll have predefined rules, native audit trails associated with those approvals as well. And so again, making sure that these are automated, consistent, helps with the compliance and then the compliant decision making across the organization based off of that as well. And then lastly, similar to number 1, but streamlined process. So it ensures that all of them are following a predefined path, removing any bottlenecks. Again, if someone's out of office, we'll talk about ways that we can kind of still streamline and keep that approval process going, kind of reducing those bottlenecks as well. So all of that built into Acumatica. We'll dive deep into those components today. But just a key high-level overview of what are some of those business benefits that people are seeing when they're starting to use the approvals within Acumatica specifically. So diving into some of the key components, these will really be the key puzzle pieces, so to say, that we'll walk through when we set up a new approval map. But this is kind of where it starts. So it starts by identifying the entity. So what's the entity that should be approved? Common examples here would include something like an AP bill or a purchase order, or maybe a time card, for example. So all of those are the different entities in Acumatica that you can then assign approval maps to. So we'll see what those options are as we get into the software in a bit. But really, that's just the highest component. We're going to start by identifying, hey, what do I want to approve? From there, we'll start to assign the steps and rules. So within Acumatica, you can have just a simple approval, everything in the system, every entity, or every purchase order, for example, whatever that entity is, all of those just get approved. Pretty simple. You could have different steps and rules as well. So maybe there's 2 steps involved in the process, where first something's getting approved by accounting, and then it's moving to, more of an executive tier. Or you can have condition-based rules as well. Something like if it's over a certain dollar amount, route it to an executive. If it's not, route it to their manager. So we'll walk through some of those use cases as well. But really the steps and rules are what define how should this get approved. And then the conditions go along with that. So what are those conditions? Things like the above a certain amount. So those conditions really feed those rules. And then what are the rule actions? Pretty straightforward, but who at the end of the day is the one approving it? Is it an individual? Is it a group, a work group, for example? We'll walk through those different options. Is it more dynamic? So it depends on, the employee that submitted something, that submitted that record. Can we dynamically route that for, their supervisor, for example? So we'll see those come into play. But really, those are the key components for setting up the approval maps within Acumatica. All right, so transitioning a little bit into the business events and notifications. Again, these can go hand in hand, they can be separate, but really business events within Acumatica are what can help feed a lot of the automation in the system. So you can have things like notifications to internal employees, for example, if they have an approval, or if a new lead was assigned to them. Whatever the case may be, you can have internal notifications based off of business events, as well as external. So if you want to send something to a customer to say, hey, you haven't paid your invoice and it was due last week, you can have that automated within the system and send those out. So as we get into the software, I'll show you different examples of common business events that we've seen, and then we'll set up a new one as well. But looking at some of the key business benefits of those is really enhanced communications across departments. So pretty high level, but you can automate those notifications, keep everyone who should be involved up to date about different updates, notifications. Really helps with eliminating the need for manual follow-ups sometimes, and really improving the coordination and accountability across the organizations. Obviously, that's kind of internally focused, but then same thing goes for external customers or vendors. Again, leveraging those communications for automated follow-ups, for example. The next is proactive issue and task management. So with the business events, you get kind of real-time alerts, which enable team members to respond to things that are changing, any assignments they have, any approvals they have, tasks, anything that maybe is odd within the system that you want to flag, whatever that case may be, you can send those automated notifications and really helps people be on top of that in real time. And then next is the increased operational visibility rather. So triggering updates based on the system events can help you gain access and insights into key activities, performance metrics, etc. So maybe you have, a customer that typically purchases a certain amount of goods from you, but they have a really high month. You want it anything above a certain amount. Hey, we want to see that. We want to get that notification. Maybe our executives want to be involved in seeing those types of updates. Or vice versa, maybe our sales team wants to see if customers that are frequently buying from you have a down month. Maybe you want an automated notification to tell you that. So really any scenario within the system connecting to the data, we can start to automate different actions and notifications based off of those as well. So that will kind of drive us into the next slide, which is the key components. So how do these start to work? what are the key components to setting these up, etc. So within a business event, really the base kind of component of it is a generic inquiry. So we've used this term multiple times before. Really, this comes into play a lot within the system. So the generic inquiry is really what determines what data is visible and available for conditioning. And based off of the conditioning, the notifications can then come to follow. So for example, if we want to send notifications based off of sales orders for a specific customer, as long as we have a generic inquiry that contains that data, we're able to push notifications, have actions based off of that as well. We've seen this come into play on the dashboarding side. So if you remember in some of the previous webinars, we talked about the generic inquiries feeding the dashboards. So they'll kind of be twofold in that sense, where obviously they contain your data, they can be filtered upon, etc. But then they really drive the key automation around the business event logic. The next component is a notification template. So that's kind of what you would assume, similar to like an email template, a text template, whatever the case may be. But that's really what the message says, who it should go to. If you're pulling in dynamic data fields, dynamic reports, maybe you're attaching something like an invoice to a customer. Whatever the case may be, the notification template is really where that's housed. So anytime these notifications are sent out, it's going to pull from that template. And again, that template could contain dynamic data, so it's updating based off of, what's on that specific record, for example. The notification schedule will determine how often it should be sent out. So you can have this based off of a schedule or a record change in the system. Obviously, if it's based off of a record change, anytime the record changes to whatever criteria you define, that's kind of going to determine the schedule or how often these could be sent out. But you can just have one that's pretty straightforward too. So something that gets sent out weekly, for example, that can fall into the notification schedule. The next is a subscriber type. So we'll see the list of this again when we get into Acumatica. That's what message is sending out. So a common one would be something like an email notification. You could also have something like a text notification or mobile push notification. So we'll walk through that use case today. What that mobile push notification does is similar to like if you're flying and you have, whatever app, as you're boarding, it might give you a push notification. So those types of things can happen that would be connected to the Acumatica mobile app. So different types of subscribers here in terms of how that message is getting sent out. There's also an import scenario type. So if you wanted certain logic in the system to then maybe create a new record or push something through a workflow, that import scenario can help as well. So that would be common, but a little bit more robust than just the basic notifications as well. And then lastly is a trigger condition. So what's the logic that should say, hey, when should this take place? So again, pretty straightforward on that front, but whatever meets that logic that's defined within that business event is when we'll go ahead and send out a notification. So those are the key components. Easy to understand, but will probably make a little bit more sense when we get into Acumatica itself. So we'll kind of pivot now and we'll take a look at a couple of use cases for setting up approvals and notifications. So first we'll set up an approval and then I'll set up a business event that really corresponds with that approval to say, hey, whoever's the approval on that specific entity, let's go ahead and send them a mobile push notification. And we'll talk through some of the differences there as well. All right, so let me stop sharing the PowerPoint and we'll switch into Acumatica. Okay, so now we're in my Acumatica demo site. And again, we'll start by walking through a scenario of setting up a new approval map. So I'll go into my configuration menu, and then there's an assignments and approval maps menu option. And so that's really where we will be working today. I will note there's kind of two different types of workflows or maps within Acumatica. The one is an approval map, so that's what we'll walk through. The other is an assignment map. So the differences there is for an approval map, it's kind of a true approval where we set up the rules based off of that entity, a purchase order, for example, that get routed for approval, and someone needs to go ahead and approve it before it can continue down the workflow. An assignment map is a little different in the sense that it's really just assigning someone to a record. So one common example might be more on the CRM side. So anytime new leads get entered in the system, maybe we want to assign those to individuals based on region, for example. So it's really just assigning someone as the owner, and they'll own that moving forward. So we'll focus primarily on approval maps, but just to orient you guys around some of the differences there, and to know that both of those are available. All right, so I'll go ahead and add a new approval map. And we'll do this for probably a common scenario, which is a purchase order approval. So I'll just give this a name and we'll start the process. So in this case, maybe I'll just call it a 2025 purchase order approval. And so as we would expect, the entity would be a purchase order. Before I go ahead and do that, I'll just kind of show you the different types of transactions or entities in Acumatica that you can approve. So pretty straightforward, but bills and adjustments, that's another common one, is the AP bill approval. And then some additional ones on kind of the banking and cash management side, depending on which version or edition of Acumatica you have, you may have additional ones. So things like change orders on the project side. If you're using things like time activities and time cards, those things can come into play as well. So we won't walk through all of this, but I'll just kind of scroll down to show you what's available within Acumatica to route for approval. So I'll start with the purchase order, and we'll go ahead and save that. And then this is where really those steps and rules come into place. So in this case, I can have different steps and different rules associated with them. I'll walk through a scenario where I just have one primary step, but maybe different rules. So depending on what I'll walk through with the amount, it may be routed to someone different. If you wanted a true kind of multi-step approval, you could do that as well. So what the steps would do is say, hey, number one will be routed to whatever rules are in place for that first step, and they need to be routed to someone else. So maybe you want it always routed to the accounting department as well as an executive at the end of the day. So that would require it to go through 2 steps of approval before it can move on in this sense. So I'll go ahead and I'll add one step to start. And we'll go ahead and save this. This is where if you had multi-steps, you can have different conditions set up to say, hey, if the approval is not found in step 1, automatically send it to the next step, or hold it in a condition. So those are some different options there. If it doesn't find an approver in the first step, reject the document or just auto approve it. So you can kind of dictate what that looks like in some of those conditions. And then same thing goes for executing the next steps. So in this sense, even if we didn't find an approver in step 1, we're always going to execute it to the next step. So a little bit of flexibility there as well. Obviously, that comes into play when using multiple steps. So here's just kind of my initial step. And then this is where it can have one or many rules associated with it. So in this case, I'll have different rules based off of the dollar amount on the purchase order itself. So the first one might just be, hey, anytime a purchase order is taken off hold or submitted, it goes to the accounting department. So we'll call this the accounting approval. And then my conditions here will be pretty high level, since anytime they're going to take that off hold and submit it, I want it routed. So all I'm going to condition this off of is if the purchase order hold is equal to, in this sense, we'll keep it open. So it's not on hold anymore, it's been submitted. So in this sense, it's going to be routed for approval, and we're going to route it to the accounting step. So as this loads, I'll kind of go ahead and put in the rule conditions as well. And we did get one chat, so I'll update my screen as well while that's loading. But the question in the chat is this, let me see here, opening it up. Is this new update as our approval maps look different? Yes, that's a good question. I should have probably prefaced by that. So if anyone was in some of the recent release webinars, you're aware that the modern UI is kind of in the process of rolling out. So currently it's in a state that on a field or a screen by screen basis, rather, you can enable the modern UI. That's what's enabled in my environment. So if I wanted to switch back to the classic one, I could do that. That will probably look similar to what a lot of you guys are using today. So I'll kind of switch back. And then I'll re-switch to the modern. So just so you can start to see, it looks a little bit more obvious when we switch back and forth, but that's what the modern UI will look like. That's kind of in the process of rolling out. Customers can currently enable it on various screens if you have permissions to do so, but that will eventually be rolling out in the upcoming releases into production on all screens. So that's why that looks a little bit different. All right. So I went ahead and added my condition. Again, as long as it's taken off hold and routed for approval, this is what's gonna reach this rule. And now I can say, what are the rule actions or who's gonna actually approve it? So in this sense, I'll add it as an employee is the one approving it. We'll see a next example where I show the employee from document. So that will be a little bit more dynamic versus just a set employee. And then in this case, we'll use Layla. She's an accountant in our finance department. It's always going to be routed to her. So I'll go ahead and save that. We'll talk through a couple of these menu options as well. So if you wanted it to route to a work group, you could do that as well. So if we said, hey, we want to just route it to the finance department, anyone within the finance department could be able to approve it. You could also have an employee listed here where it says, if Layla is able to approve it, that's who it should really be routed to. However, anyone in that finance department could pick it up as well. So that's kind of the functionality of the work group that would require us to have the work group set up within Acumatica. So we'd have to dictate, okay, who falls into which work group. And as long as we have that set up, that functionality would exist as well. We also have the option to reassign approvals. So if you have that enabled, Layla, for example, could reassign this to someone else. So if she saw it and said, hey, I have no idea what this purchase is for, doesn't really make sense to me, but I know that Bob within my department really knows what this is for. So I'm going to reassign it to Bob. So that's really what that checkbox allows, is that you allow the specific approver to reassign that to another individual within the organization. So again, determine whether or not you want that allowed. The decision wait time will be, if I have this routed for approval and it's been in their queue for 7 days, should we, keep it? Should we, do some different actions based off of it, or just keep it in the queue? So that would allow for, we only want this in, Layla's queue for 7 days, for example. So that's where that comes into play. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Again, at all purchase orders, route through to the accounting department. So that's kind of the first step. And then maybe I have another step that says, if it's based off of a certain amount, for example, it's going to bypass that accounting approval and it's going to go to someone else. So in this sense, I'll add an additional step. And then the rule associated with this will be dependent on the amount. So it's going to always route to the accountant, but then if it's above a certain amount, it's also going to route in this sense to the manager. So here I'll go ahead, same thing, we're working with the purchase order. And then the field that we're going to condition based off of is the order total. So here's my order total. And in this sense, I'm going to do is between certain values. So maybe I only want it if it's above $1,000 to route to the manager, but I may have another step or rule that says, if it's above $5,000 though, we don't want to go into the manager, we want it to go to the actual executive in the company. So that's kind of the scenario we'll work with. So I'll do between, so anything over $1,000 is going to go to this manager. So my rule actions here will be not the employee this time, but I'll make it more dynamic. So I'll do employee by document. And in this case, what we're going to look at is whoever submitted that purchase order, we're going to look at that employee record and we're going to pull whoever they report to. So if I submitted it, for example, it's going to pull and route to my manager, whereas if someone else in a different department submitted a purchase order, then they can go ahead and route to their other manager. So may or may not be the same use cases as you guys have. Maybe this would be more on like the purchase request side. That could make sense. But just to show you guys the flexibility of the tool and the ability to pull in dynamically who should be approving that document. So I'll go ahead. Now you'll see I have a list of different fields. And so I'll go ahead, scroll down a bit here, lots of fields. And we'll go to the employee reports to, which is going to automatically and dynamically pull in whoever the employee supervisor is associated with that document. Same settings as before. I could dictate, should a work group also be kind of a fallback from that or not? Do I allow reassignment, etc.? So that's kind of the first step. And I'll actually change this to be a little bit more intuitive there. So this is kind of the second step. Manager could approve it. Or if it's above the 5,000, like we talked about, we're actually going to have the executive approve it. All right, so I'll save this and then should start to look a little bit pretty more straightforward at this point, but same thing, we'll do the order total. And now the condition here will be if it's greater than 5,000. Now the rule actions is just going to be Michael Andrews is the CEO, so he's going to have to go ahead and approve that for anything over $5,000. So pretty straightforward, but just a two-step approval here. All purchase orders will get routed to Layla in the first step, and then dependent on the amount, if it's above $1,000, it also needs to get routed to a manager. If it's above $5,000, it's going to instead bypass this manager, but go to the executive. If it was under $1,000, this is kind of where that step ends. So it's not going to keep routing it to the next steps unless it fits that criteria. All right. It doesn't look like any questions at this time. So with that, I set up my new purchase order approval. If I want to go ahead and just make sure that this is enabled and flowing through, maybe I had a previous purchase order approval that I set up in the system. I want to tweak it or add a new one. I could do that as well. So if I go into just my purchase order preferences, this is where I say, okay, do I require approval or not? And then based off of this, I can search that new approval map. So there's my 2025 approval, and I can save that for any normal purchase orders in this sense. So that's how you would actually assign it to the purchase order approval settings so that it's pulling that specific map. Again, if I needed to change this, I could remove this one and add a new one or tweak the one I currently have. So that's kind of the approval side. So now let's say we're going to have this thing route through an approval, and anytime it gets routed to someone for approval, we want to go ahead and send them, a mobile push notification. So that's really where the business events will start to come into play. So I'll go into my business events screen. And just before I kind of create the new one, you'll see some already created in my system. So these would be kind of the common ones we start to see. But just to give you kind of an idea of what's available, what types of things we can have. So on the CRM side, for example, we talked about something like, a new lead's assigned to you. So maybe we want notifications telling people about that, based off of the assignment map on the lead. Or in this sense, we're going to notify all salespeople if they've had no activity, for a certain period of time. So different types of events that we can have, internal and external. Common examples on the external facing notifications would be like we talked about previously, which is an invoice that's coming due in 15 days, for example, or it's past due. So this is kind of starting to feed the basics, obviously, of one that's already within the system, but it's pulling from, a specific inquiry. We'll see what that looks like as we build out our example. It's based off of various trigger conditions. So in this sense, it's looking at the AR invoice, it's looking at the due date on that AR invoice, and anytime it's today minus 15, so it's due in 15 days, then this is when it's going to trigger. So we'll see that by trigger by that schedule here. The subscriber is really the type of notification we want. So we walked through some of those. Maybe you want the email notification going out, a mobile push notification, a text message, or a task assignment. So all of those are kind of options as well. In this example, it's an email notification going to the customer. And to take a look at what this looks like, this is where you'll start to have really that template that we've seen, and then who it should go to. So in this case, it's dynamically pulling, the contact email, the AR reference number, and then this is really the basis of the email as well. So you can have those data fields pull in, so it's dynamic in that sense. But just a little bit of the basics. So now we'll go ahead and just create a new record. And we'll call this PO approval notification. We'll pull in that purchase orders inquiry. So you'll see it kind of pulled that in. Let me just change that quickly. Looks like I had one named that already. So now I can pull in what's the inquiry that we're pulling it from. So in this case, I want to do my purchase orders. We'll see that screen ID there. And then we'll say trigger by record change. So anytime a record changes, in this case, what we'll look at is the status changes to pending approval. That's when I'm going to trigger this event. All right, so I'll save that. And now I can go ahead and set my trigger conditions. So you'll see, since that's the type there, it's requiring me to have those trigger conditions set before I can go ahead and save it. So that was that pop-up message there. But in this sense, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, anytime a field is changed or a new record or new field value is identified for that status that equals pending approval, I can go ahead and add that in. So we'll have a couple of different rules here. And we'll take a look at the purchase order. In this case, it's just the document, and then the field name. So the status that I'm going to look at, or the status is the field name that I'm going to look at. So we'll add a couple of things here. So if it's changed or a record has been inserted, this is where we'll go ahead and pull it based off of that status. So if the status changed or has a new value and those equal pending approval, this is what's going to trigger this notification to go out. So again, the trigger conditions can be, pretty granular if you need. In my example, they're just looking at the status. So anytime it changes or it's entered and that status equals pending approval, this is when I'm going to go ahead and send out this event. So now we'll create the subscriber. I may have already had a previous subscriber that I want to use and tweak. In this case, I haven't created one yet. And remember, the subscriber is the actual notification and associated message. I could do an email notification. I'll switch things up a little bit and we'll do a mobile push notification. And here, give it a description. We'll go ahead and assign it to the approver. So we'll use the screen fields to dynamically pull the approver on the document. And so we'll send it to the user of that approver record. So anytime it's routed to someone, It's going to give them a mobile push notification associated with their user account in Acumatica. And then I can go ahead and save it. This is where the body of the message needs to be identified. So it could be as simple as I wanted it, or more complex using those data fields as well. But we'll keep it a little bit simple for the sake of the demonstration. And then we could do things like add in a link with dynamic data as well. So for example, here's just the link to that specific record within this instance. This is where that order number that's pulls into the link at the top, you'd likely want to insert a data field so that you're pulling in that dynamic number. So here I'll pull in the purchase order document number. So that it's dynamic, that link will always change based off of the document of the PO they actually need to approve. And then I can go ahead and save that. Anytime this is triggered, this is the message that will go out. It's dynamically sending to whoever the correct approver is. It's a mobile push notification on their device. Again, we could have it be something like a text message or an email notification as well. And then we're inserting that link, which will be dynamic since we pulled in that order number field. All right, so now that's added and everything kind of looks good. So we have the entire business event, we have the conditions and the subscriber. You can build these out if, for example, you don't want these sending anymore. Maybe someone's a pretty big approver in the company and they get 1 million of these push notifications a day. Maybe we want to tweak this a bit or deactivate this. Think about a different approach here as well. But this is where you can deactivate it, activate it, etc. And then once we start sending these approvals out, these conditions are met. You can also view all the history of these business events within Acumatica. So on every business event screen, you can view the history, see if those are sending out correctly, how often they are. So that might aid in helping, we're getting 1,000 of these a day versus, just 5. So that's where you can start to see it. We had one more question. Let me see here. Can this event get sent with parameters like just every morning? Yes, they can. So in this case, we can start to set, let me see, I believe it's on here. But if you go back to our PowerPoint where we have that schedule, you can certainly set it on a schedule. So yes, you can have those parameters, but then you say, hey, we only want to send this out once a week or once every morning at 8 a.m. So you can have those schedules associated with these business events as well. All right. Any other questions while we're kind of in the system? Otherwise, we'll kind of pivot back to the PowerPoint and we'll talk about some next steps. All right, let me pull back up my screen here. All right, well, that's all we had. Again, may have been a new concept to some folks, may have just been a little bit of a refresher, walking through how we can start to leverage those within Acumatica, maybe in a more robust way than we're currently using them today. So lots of options there. A couple of things here. One, you can contact us. If you liked what you saw today, you have questions about how you might set up certain scenarios, whatever the case may be, feel free to reach out to either that contact email or the support email, and we can kind of associate and help you guys out from there. Our next webinar is on August 13th. So that will be kind of around the whole order to cash process. So we'll walk through that kind of flow and we'll really try to highlight a lot of the automation areas associated with that as well. So things like click to pay options, I know we've talked about that before, automated notifications, how those can start to feed themselves into that specific workflow. All of those types of things will be highlighted in that webinar too. So if you're interested in attending, you can scan that QR code there. We'll also be sending out an invite via email, but you can kind of save your spot early by scanning that QR code. And then I know we walked through and alluded to the fact that we have other webinars in the series. So if you're new here or returning and kind of just forgot and want to explore some of the past webinars we've done, you can find those on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, search SVA Consulting, and then we have a whole playlist on our Acumatica webinars. So that's where you can dive deeper into various things like the dashboarding, how we start to customize those. I know that was a popular topic as well. So definitely feel free to explore those. And then we always just add that community link. So we invite everyone that's an Acumatica customer to join the Acumatica community if you haven't already, and post in it, explore things in it. A lot of good ideas come from customers in that community as well. So feel free to visit that. But with that, I think it doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat. So we can kind of wrap up, and I appreciate all of you for joining today. Thank you.